Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Nordic Sound. As always, I am your host, Jamison Foster, ethnomusicologist at the University of Colorado Boulder. And today I am joined by Maja Kjaer Jacobson of Maja Kjaer C Orchestra. Sorry, I'm only just recently learning how to pronounce her name correctly, so I just know I'm going to fumble it eventually if I haven't already. But Maja Kjaer is a great Danish fiddler, and she is coming onto the podcast to talk about her debut album, Landing with Maja Kjaer C Orchestra, as well as any other folk music-related topics that we feel like discussing today. So, Maja, thank you so much for coming onto the channel, the podcast. It is so great to have you.
Thank you for inviting me. It's very exciting.
Yep, it's I've been wanting to have you on for a long time, and I'm just glad that we finally got it to work.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, so what have you been up to lately? Have you been playing live? Any gigs? Just I don't know. What do you spend your summer doing as a as a Danish folk musician?
Well, this summer has actually not been that busy.
Hmm.
Last summer was really busy. Like when we released the album, we had like 4 festivals and all the additional venue gigs all over the fall. But the spring, I actually spent on writing music for a music performance, which
Okay.
was my exam concert for for a degree I was taking on the
Oh, cool.
Music Academy in Esbjerg in Denmark. Yeah. So I actually spent a lot of time on that in the spring, and then you know how it is
Yeah.
when you don't work on getting gigs, you don't have any. So
Yeah.
that's how it
Hmm.
works.
Yeah.
So
Very
that's
much.
actually my summer this year.
Hmm.
Yep.
Yeah. Cool.
Hmm.
I didn't realize that you were still at Academy for that sort of stuff. So it makes sense to me that you weren't performing that much because that whole exam process can
Yeah,
really just take all of your life force away.
it did. For about 6 months, I was like flying through air trying to get everything done in
Hmm.
time.
Yep.
Also realizing as I did this that I would not be able to get everything done by the end of the process,
Ah.
by the deadline.
Hmm.
So it was very much like, okay, I'm doing this. I'm getting it done. So yeah,
All right.
yeah,
Well,
very
well.
busy
Hopefully,
times.
hopefully you came out. Hopefully you came out unscathed, or at
I
least
I
in
came out
relatively.
alive, sort of, and I'm still working my way up from the deep depths of well, not really being able to think about anything else for a while.
Yeah,
So,
the recovery process
whew,
for that is quite
yeah,
long.
it is.
Yeah.
Still,
So.
still there.
Mhm. Oh yeah. Awesome. Awesome. So. I'm really curious. Before we get into talking more specifically about the music that you were doing with this new ensemble, I'm especially for Danish musicians. I don't know if you listen to any of my conversation with Mia Goldhammer,
A
but
little
I
bit,
I
yeah.
find Danish musicians, folk musicians, are really interesting to talk about, considering just like the weird place folk music has in Denmark compared to the other
Yeah,
Scandinavian or even Nordic countries.
yeah,
So I'm always really interested in how Danish musicians get into folk music in the first place. So I guess I just wanted to give you just the opportunity to, I don't know, take us through how you got into folk music in the first place,
right.
and what that
Yeah.
was like learning folk music in Denmark.
Okay. I My father is a guitarist and a singer,
Hmm.
just in his free time, spare time,
Hmm.
so an amateur. But when I was a kid, growing up, we used to go with him to the festivals and county halls,
Okay.
and to hear him play. Um, and all the families of all the members in the group used to come as well. So we had
Hmm.
this whole little, like, a little festival every time we went to these things. But that was folk songs from England, Scotland, Ireland, that sort of thing.
Hmm.
So I didn't really know about Danish folk music, Danish traditional music, until I was about 18, 19,
Okay.
I
So that
think,
late.
when, yeah,
Hmm.
exactly. And it was mostly because my teacher at the music school, um, I asked him, do you know anybody who can teach me this kind of music? So
Hmm.
Irish and Scottish music, on the fiddle, that is.
Hmm.
And he knew one person who was a fiddler, but a Danish fiddler.
Hmm.
So this was Claus Pinstrup, who I then went to see in 2003 for the first time.
Okay.
And there I realized what a monster Danish traditional music is. Basically, because
Yeah.
I realized how many details, how much, like, how many layers
Hmm.
of, like, whatever, how many things you can think about in the
Hmm.
music, and how many things you can notice if you're aware of it.
Hmm.
And he taught me this, like, from the first day. He saw or heard that I had a flair for learning these tunes in
Hmm.
that way, in the way that he played them,
Hmm.
and just, like, kept going with with that style that he plays, because he's not, like, he's also one of a kind fiddler in
Hmm.
Denmark. And it took me a lot of years to realize what kind of approach he actually has to
Hmm.
the music. But that's a whole other story.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, yeah. So I started taking lessons with Claus in 2003,
Hmm.
and in 2004 I went to my first folk music and dancing camp here in
Hmm.
Denmark, called Fod, which
Okay.
means foot. Yep. And there I met my tribe, basically.
Awesome.
Yeah. The people, the young people that also were interested in this kind of music, and
Hmm.
it was like an epiphany for me. I'd never met any other young people who were interested in folk music.
Hmm.
I was always just with my father and my family at these
Hmm.
concerts that he played. So meeting a whole bunch of young people who played and danced and sang, as with the music as their own thing,
Hmm.
that was really, really great.
Yeah, I noticed
And
that that's a such an important part of most people's journey as a musician, is especially
yeah,
when you get into like a really niche kind of anything not mainstream really.
yeah,
It can sometimes feel isolating. Wondering like, why am I the only one that listens
yeah,
to this? Why am I the only one that
yeah,
likes this? Am I a freak? Am I weird? And then it's so important when you then actually meet other people, even just roughly in your age group, who listen to the same
yes,
thing, and you're like, oh, other people exist, and now that
yeah,
means that I can actually have friends that do this stuff too. Yeah.
yeah. And this thing exists.
Hmm.
Like, the music does exist. It's not
Yep.
just me who thinks it exists. Like,
Yep. Hmm.
yeah. So I kept going with that, and in 2006 I got into the folk music course at the Music Academy in
Cool.
Odense. I was there for, well, basically 6 years, but I also had 1 year where I did my own studies. So I went to Norway for a while to
Hmm.
learn to play the Hardanger fiddle,
Oh,
and
cool.
to learn how to dance their traditional
Hmm.
dances, and also to just kind of feel what it was like to be in a place where more people knew what the traditional music and dancing
Hmm.
was, basically. And I found the tune book, the original book after the fiddler Anders Top, from this area where I'm from,
Hmm.
um, which is also a great long story.
Yeah,
Yes.
Jutland, right?
Yes,
Hmm.
yes,
Cool.
Central Jutland,
Hmm.
yeah. Um, and the year after that, I went to Limerick in Ireland to study for 4 months as
Hmm.
well. So again, with the idea to be in an environment, in a community where the music would just be a part of
Hmm.
everyday life. And when I was done with the academy, the year after that I went to live on Fanø, on the
Okay.
west coast of Denmark,
Hmm.
where they have a very strong tradition. I'm sure you know what
Yep.
some of that
Yeah, I
some of
know.
that
Yeah,
story.
especially I mean, it's like with Runa from the Danish String Quartet, and with
Yes,
Dreamers
yeah,
Circus, like they deal a lot with at least that region. So
yeah,
that's primarily how I've learned about that region, as well as going through other tune books. I've noticed that nine times out of 10 when I stumble upon a Danish tune, it's from Fano.
Yeah, it's
Yep.
very popular, and
Yep.
it's also because it's the tradition that is the strongest in Denmark now.
Hmm.
And there used to be a lot more traditions all over the place, or I mean, we still consider them as something part of our tradition,
Hmm.
but they're not as alive as they used to be
Yep.
in living tradition.
Hmm.
So that's the thing about Fanø. It's not considered in Sønderho
Hmm.
on Fanø. It's not considered folk music. It's not like
Okay.
it's just music.
Because it's
You
just,
just do it.
okay,
Yeah,
cool.
yeah, and that's the difference.
Hmm.
Because it's just something that you do whenever you're invited for coffee. Remember to bring your fiddle, because it might turn into a house party.
Excellent.
Yes,
It sounds like a good life. Yeah.
it was really nice, and I used to sit in with the Peter Urbrand and Tove de Vries, the great fiddlers from in Sønderho,
Hmm.
when they were playing for dancing in the community hall and all that. So
Hmm.
yeah, got a lot of out of that. Also, just to actually learn how to play the traditional music from the rest of the country, because it's even though it doesn't sound the same necessarily, it's still the same approach and the same kind of, there's something in the drive that is the same, although it sounds different.
Yeah. And I'm already just noticing something very just interesting about you, like your I don't know if you want to call it training or research, whatever you want to call it. You're just your development, I think, is the word I would use as a fiddler, is that you're traveling a lot. Like the stereotype of fiddlers is that they stay in their valley, they never leave,
No.
and even though that is just like a stereotype or a caricature or whatever, like I have found that the traveling doesn't come until much later, and it seems that for you the traveling is just a part of how you learned, because it seems like you wanted to just immerse yourself in these different areas where the music was just far more central to everyday life, and that makes a lot of sense when I'm thinking about especially how your album turned out, with like it sounds very much like a gumbo of all these different styles in this really awesome way. Yeah, but I just wanted to call attention to that right now, that I'm really interested in just how you just embedded travel and experiences into your development as a fiddler.
Yeah, I traveled a lot with my then boyfriend, David Boulanger, a fiddler of La Bottine Souriante and De Temps en Temps from Quebec, in Canada. And that's how I kind of started traveling with the music I like to earn a living. And I got a lot of experience from that, and a lot of input. So a lot of noticing how you play traditional music in other places, noticing how you perceive tradition, how you perceive community, that sort of thing, which is something that I'm always looking for in Denmark, which is not, as I mentioned before, it's not very strong in local communities, but it's strong as a nationwide thing. So you meet up in Denmark, you meet up in festivals or camps, and kind of come together to play, to have jam sessions and exchange tunes and thoughts and reflections and all that. But for me, it kind of started out as a part of traveling. Also because I started playing with Elise from Norway and Anna from Sweden in the trio Fruskerak.
Okay.
And we have also traveled Canada, the States, Australia, all over Europe, and Scandinavia, of course. So there's always some kind of exchange of music between local musicians. And it's all of this, actually, that I feel like has been put into this album landing with my own orchestra, because it actually felt kind of natural, even though I didn't know when I started this band what it would sound like, because I had a bunch of tunes and a bunch of tunes that I kind of wrote in the span of 15 years, and then and like with inspiration from a ton of different places. so you don't really know what it's going to sound like when you put it into one specific group of musicians and what they make of it
Yep.
and what you can actually get from that situation. So I might have had some kind of vision of what I wanted the music to sound like, but I also just had to kind of go with the situation and let these musicians take over, sort of.
Yeah, and that can be scary,
Yeah,
right? I mean, like especially
very
if you
much.
have if you have these tunes that, even, you can write a tune like a week ago and it will already occupy a very special place in your heart. Like, so we're not even getting into like if you write a tune for and 15 years later it's still, close to you. That
Yeah,
can be a pretty scary exercise in control or letting go of control.
yeah, letting
When you
go.
yeah, when you have, especially, you've got some wild card musicians there, like Jacob is a very dear friend of the channel, and like I just know that he is just like a golden retriever on a drum in with any percussion, where he's just like happy to be there playing with everything and all of that.
Yeah.
And so even just that one example, right? Yeah, what is that like when you have this repertoire of tunes that you've written and are close to you? What is that experience like when you bring it to a band and you have to sort of just see what happens with it?
Um. Well, first of all,
Hmm.
I gathered these musicians. I mean, I gathered up the first version of the band
Hmm.
in 2021, I
Hmm.
think, because I wanted to get into that course at the music academy
Hmm.
that I've actually just finished.
Hmm.
So I actually made this band to get into that education,
Hmm.
into that program.
Cool.
Um, but so it was very much like totally forgot the question. What was the question?
Well, no, so you can even just talk about like maybe even before getting into that whole what we were talking about is the that control element of like
Yes.
or
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
maybe even the controlled chaos of bringing a band
Yeah.
together and giving them tunes that you've written. But if you feel like it might be better to talk about just how the band came together before we get into that, we could start there too, especially because that seems to be naturally where you were going with that.
Well, it's actually a part of the same thing.
All right, cool. Yeah, yeah.
The letting go, because it's the first time I've gathered a group of people like this to become a band on
Hmm.
my like initiative.
Hmm.
So and so at the time I had not been a band leader at
Hmm.
all,
Okay. That can already be
which
scary.
means
Yeah.
yes. So I, like coming with just arriving with these tunes and chords and harmony voices and stuff, and I had no clue how to like start.
Hmm.
No idea. So it's also been like a learning curve.
Hmm.
And yeah, and a practicing letting go very
Hmm.
much, and trusting the process, just saying like, if I have no clue, I'll just say that. You have to, because there's no point in trying to say that you know exactly where we're going if you
Hmm.
don't.
Yeah,
So
especially if you have a bunch of musicians in there that play instruments that you're not familiar with. Like I'm just going
yeah,
to I'm going to keep using drums as an example because that's the thing where I'm not a percussionist. I'm primarily a string player. And so even though of course I understand how rhythm works, right? It's very different from like playing with rhythm as a percussionist. It's an entirely different point of view with rhythm.
yeah,
And so I'd noticed whenever I take music to a percussionist of any kind, like the way that they view this whole rhythmic dimension can completely transform the way that a tune sounds when
yes,
without the percussionist.
yeah.
So yeah, so like I'm assuming that played a role. Like these musicians, maybe even brass. I don't know if you are a brass player, but yourself.
I'm
But
not.
yeah,
I'm
so
not.
all the way that all these different types of musicians can completely alter like
Yeah,
the way that a tune comes out, just because their instrument shapes their perception of music.
yes,
Hmm.
and also like I don't think I've come to a point where I'm like I want to get better at trusting each like person's each instrumentalist's what do you call it, like
Musicianship or
personality,
oh,
yeah,
personality. Okay, yeah,
personality
yeah.
in
Hmm.
the music when they play, so that it actually shapes it will turn out in a way that is actually a combination of all these musicians, instead of trying to think you need this bass line, you need this harmony voice, you need stuff to complete the arrangement. Like, because if it doesn't fit with the instrument or the instrumentalists that you're giving this to, then it won't work.
Yep.
So I still think I have a lot of practice left in that situation.
It's a never-ending battle.
Yeah,
You know, like
and
it's just,
I think it's great. I love this process of learning how to start. Like, how much do I give these people? How much do I ask them? What do you think of this? What would you do? What's your preference? What if I gave you this kind of tune? What would it sound like where you come from? And so there's still a lot of questions I can ask, and we can experiment with the outcome of a single tune.
Yeah. Would you say that this was maybe the biggest challenge of working with an ensemble, or was there something else? Because at least I know for me, like, of course it's easier to just play solo. You know what I mean? You just play, it's all that. But after a while, you get kind of lonely. You know what I mean? So you do eventually need a band. And I've always found that dynamic as a folk musician is really healthy to, like, you know, and what ultimately encourages you to branch out, because especially as a fiddler, you could just play alone all day, you know, because you play the fiddle, and especially, you know, as you know, with the hardanger fiddlers, many times they do. And so I was wondering, like, was this the biggest challenge for you doing this album, or were there maybe other challenges as well that you didn't foresee going into it?
There were other challenges as well, just like the style of playing between all of us. Because we don't come from the same background, either of us. Like, none of us come from the same background. So George comes from Romania and has played traditional music on the cymbalum there, learning from his family, his grandparents. And Rasmus, the tuba player, is from the free jazz environment, like free jazz community, and has played. He said at some point, he told me at some point, when he was studying, he spent 6 years trying to figure out how many weird sounds he could make on the tuba.
That sounds like a brass player. They're very similar here in the States.
That's so. That's very okay. How do I start with this one? Yeah, and then Jakob, the percussionist, he's you know, all over the place, but very much in medieval music, Viking music, this pagan thing.
So you've got this whole spectrum.
Yeah. And so when we met up the first couple of times, it was very much like, okay, so 6/8 sounds like that in that place, and that like that there. Okay, how are we gonna like get this to merge somehow? Very very interesting conversations and experiments, and I think we got somewhere.
I would say you got somewhere. I mean, like, as I said, even just the tuba on that record won me over immediately. Cool. I was just like, and yeah,
very happy to hear that.
Yeah, no, it was just, everything was just so refreshing, and it makes sense to me that there was this much of a challenge going into it, because you're right, when you've got this Romanian cymbalum player, free jazz tuba player, and then this Viking guy on the drums, and then a Jutland fiddler tying it all together. It's just like, I agree with you. How do you even start? When I love the example you used is when you all even just have a different idea of just what 6/8 can mean.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know, like, I do know that certain types from certain melody types from the Danish traditional music is hard to perceive or like understand when you come from other places, because it's just a thing like the waltz and 6/8 and the polka. I mean, the polka in theory it's the same thing as a reel. Like written down, you could like mistake the two.
Yep.
but definitely not when it's played. And then like figuring out how to explain the difference is that I figured that one out when I was in Ireland. So
Yep.
yeah. Um but you like with all the travel that I did, I tried to learn how to explain these differences and
Hmm.
how if I was teaching a polka or a Danish waltz somewhere outside of Denmark, I'd have to kind of take something that they knew
Hmm.
maybe and just kind of okay, well, this one, it goes a bit more like this.
Hmm.
uh, and I'm still learning, especially when you then meet up with new like musicians you've never played with before and then try to explain it in their way,
Hmm.
like how would they think it
Hmm.
if they're coming from a different place.
Yeah, and this sounds like
Yeah.
it's even like just a because the next thing I was going to ask is what important lessons did you learn as a musician, or how did this whole process like help like change you as a musician or help you grow? And it already sounds like that's a really great starting point. It's like actually like just how do you explain these things, across these
Hmm.
cultural boundaries, which may have entirely different conceptions of how just a time signature works.
Yeah.
So yeah, because you brought this band together as a part of your academic assignment and responsibilities and all that. Not to sound too much like a professor, but what did you learn today in doing all of this? Yeah. So like, what role? I guess maybe if I can simplify that question, just like what sort of lessons did you learn in as a musician bringing this band together and making this really crazy, weird in a good way album?
Well, for a lot of different things,
Hmm.
but mostly, well, the biggest lesson
Hmm.
lessons
Yeah.
were that like how to be a band leader.
Hmm.
I'm still learning about that, but
Oh
I
yeah,
think I
never.
got
You'll never
much
end.
better,
Yeah, never.
much better already. Like,
Awesome.
and then this whole thing about how to approach writing music for a group where you're actually playing yourself as well.
Hmm.
Because I've also started writing music for uh, classical musicians,
Hmm. Oh,
where
cool.
I'm not supposed to be present. So there's a big difference there,
Hmm.
how to write for a band where you're in it yourself, and then yeah,
Hmm.
for classical musicians where I'm not there.
Yeah.
And then how exactly what we talked about before, just how to let go of control and
Hmm.
how to meet it and like show up to a rehearsal with some kind of idea of a tune or like chords,
Hmm.
etc., or not. Like, how much can I not bring? Um, and I think there's a very wide, a lot of possibility in that range because you can show up with almost nothing and a bunch of crazy ideas, and
Hmm.
like both ends of the scale will still become some kind of arrangement.
Hmm.
So I'm not so afraid of not having enough ideas anymore.
Okay, that's
Yeah,
awesome. Because that's a
yeah,
struggle.
yeah, yeah. And I do have a lot of ideas, so it's also just okay. Relax. Just don't bring too much, please, for
Hmm.
my own sake and for everybody else's sake, because they always have another idea of how, like, they know exactly what their strengths are.
Hmm.
I don't know them exactly that much yet,
Hmm.
so I better just bring the idea, say, I have this kind of feel of it, and
Hmm.
then leave it to them to support that idea
Yep,
in
for
their
sure.
way. Yeah.
Yeah, that's because something else that's on my mind about this is, and you mentioned this in the emails before the Zoom call, was this idea of forbidden instruments
Yeah.
that was a part of this. I consider me completely intrigued in just that because I had no idea that this was even a part of it. So I would just love to hear about, maybe I'll just give you the floor. Talk about what you mean when you were talking to me about forbidden instruments being involved in this thing, because that's
Yeah.
something that I, as an ethnomusicologist, one of the things that really got me invested in the fiddle is how the fiddle, for thousands of years has been this stand-in for Satanism or
Yeah,
or heresy, or but then at the
exactly.
same but then one town over there will be a fiddle on the mural in a church. So it's like, which one is it? Is this Satan's
Exactly.
instrument, or do angels play this, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm very personally invested and interested in how instruments, particularly the fiddle, can just become these symbols or these stand-ins for so many different, often contradicting things,
Mm.
especially the hardanger
Mm.
fiddle, in Norway went through a whole lot of that. So
Hmm.
yeah, so anyway, consider I am your target audience for talking about forbidden instruments. So I'm
Okay.
yeah, love to hear about it.
So, as you mentioned, the fiddle or the violin used to be the devil's instrument,
Hmm.
also in Denmark, and was, I don't know the exact
Hmm.
dates and
Yeah, yeah.
years, but like at some point, you could not play this instrument in the churches.
Hmm.
Um, so that's one thing, and
Hmm.
then the tuba
Hmm.
brass instrument in Denmark, using brass instruments for traditional music after World War II
Hmm.
was kind of a dying species
Okay.
because
Hmm.
of other historical references.
Yeah, yeah.
It was too much associated with marching bands
Hmm.
and nationalism in a very bad way.
Yep. Hmm.
So, but it used to be a strong thing in
Hmm.
Denmark as well, playing this music on brass instruments. So I thought, okay, we'll just pick some of that, and it's not forbidden anymore, and people
Hmm.
do it, but it's just not perceived as an instrument that is a part of traditional music
Yeah,
from
I
Denmark.
I noticed brass instruments in general kind of got buried over time. Like
Yeah,
I even just know that the trumpet, at least in Norway, the trumpet used to be like a highly prized instrument, and now
right.
no one
Okay.
thinks of the trumpet as a traditional Norwegian instrument because
No,
it's not as sexy as the hardanger fiddle.
no.
Yeah, but your point is well taken. Just brass
Hmm.
instruments in general, just maybe even because of the association with jazz and that whole cultural conflict that maybe just like, oh, now they're officially American instruments because of jazz
Yeah,
or something like that. Yeah.
exactly. And it's considered to be a part of another kind of folk music and not from
Hmm.
Denmark.
Yep.
Um, but I just wanted to test this this sound in this connection, really.
Hmm.
Yeah. So that's that idea.
Okay.
and and then the drums.
Hmm.
Um, Also, Danish folk music history
Hmm.
is there was a point or a period of time in Danish history where to be able to play for dances and any kind of celebration, birthdays, weddings, funerals, whatever, you had to have a license from the king
Hmm.
to be allowed to play for these things, and
Hmm.
which meant like this was, I think, I've been searching for the exact year, but I can't find it anywhere. So it's somewhere in history.
Hmm.
I have to dig a little deeper, I think. But
For this licensing system, or for the
yeah, for
yeah,
the
yeah, the
yeah,
licensing system, that would have been probably like again, I would only be roughly
1660
yeah.
to 1800
Yeah, that was
is what
exactly.
we
I
yeah
was about to say roughly 1600s to 1800s would be
yeah
roughly that range. Yeah, and this podcast isn't a history test, so if
no
we're wrong, then
we're
like
okay.
someone will correct us. But at least for the purpose of conversation, that is roughly
Yeah,
the range that we're talking about. Yeah.
yeah. So that's part of like Danish folk music and traditional music is a lot of it is younger than say Swedish or Norwegian music because it it was only played way out like
Hmm.
in the countryside where nobody else was coming and nobody was checking
Yeah, there were no
because it
cops.
wasn't allowed. Yeah. So when it kind of like when that was abolished, is that the word?
Yeah, or
Yeah,
yeah,
abolished.
sure thing.
Okay.
Why not?
Um Everybody started playing the fiddle again, and everybody started to learn how to write music. So
Hmm.
you have a lot of tune books, handwritten tune books from like all over Denmark from the 1800s and onward. So the 1800s is this, I think, the most handwritten tune books we have collected in Denmark are from that period of time.
Cool.
Yeah. So, and also the music, the folk music that was played at that time is now considered traditional music in this country. So a lot of the older stuff kind of died because of that system. So talking about forbidden folk music as well, you know. Okay, so that was it. That was that. Last thing. Yes. Okay, so the drums. That's the part where this gets interesting because playing the drums and singing were not considered instruments.
Right.
So you could sing and you could play the drum, and I think even the bagpipes or something like that.
Okay.
They were not considered real instruments. So that's why the drums or the percussion in this band is a forbidden instrument as well.
Okay, cool. Yeah, because I thought what I thought was going to go with there was just the history of drums being like because I know Jacob talks about this quite a bit. Is just like the weird history the drums have as like this latent pagan practice thing that is mentioned in the sagas and things is like witchcraft was done through the drum. So the drums, and at least this is in Norway, so I don't really know how much this translated to Denmark. But there were a lot of if you were a witch with a drum, you'd burn the drum, and especially the interactions with the Sami as well as the drums became this absolutely like the perfect example of a forbidden instrument. So even going that deep, right? Like you definitely are collecting all of these forbidden instruments and playing. It's and I just love the addition of I like that the percussion instruments are becoming more popular in folk music. I've been hearing it more lately, and that's something that I love. The combination of a fiddle and a drum. That's all I need. I love it.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It is. And figuring out how to like support what's going on in the tunes and the style and everything with the drums. Just a single drum, or preferably a single drum. Then you can really hear what's possible and what's going on. Yeah, I think that's really cool.
Yeah, do you think? Because I know you mentioned that the Irish and Scottish music was pretty formative to you early on, unless I misheard you. And I noticed that the chieftains in general, with their use of the bodhran, they really opened up the possibilities, at least in Irish music, of all of a sudden everyone wanted a bodhran in their music.
Yeah.
And I was just wondering, like, did that play a role in you wanting to include the drum? Like, how much did that Irish music connection sort of cultivate this interest for the drum in you, if at all?
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I'm really not sure.
Gotcha.
I think what I thought was I want some kind of percussion, but it has to be not the typical percussion drum kit thing that's going on other places in other bands in Scandinavia. So something else. And then that's why I thought of Jacob, because he's kind of a mix between the two. And does other things than the other drummers. So I mean, they're all different, but I don't know.
All
There's
good.
something about like considering what was going on in Scandinavia already, and then trying to hit something that wasn't the usual thing.
Yep, and I think it worked. I just love the use of percussion in landing is just it really keeps the album driving forward, and there are a lot of surprises around every corner of what's going to happen with this tune.
Yeah.
So it a great addition. So then I think so there's talking about all the instruments in general. I do want to go back to the fiddle, particularly. Please.
There's one instrument that we forgot. The
cymbalum. Yeah. Please. Yeah.
Because it's not a national instrument it is. It's part of a family that used to be all over Europe. This also in Danish called a hakkebræt.
Okay.
A chopping board.
All right.
But it's also like the family of the hammered dulcimer,
Hmm.
and other types of this kind of instrument. And I found out, I actually thought that in Denmark it was connected to traveling people,
Hmm.
to gypsies
Hmm.
and people who used to travel with music, or just nomadic
Yeah.
people. Um, but I found out that, and this makes it not so forbidden after all, but I'm going to reveal
All right.
this might be the truth and the opposite of what I thought. But
And that's learning.
that's learning, exactly, because I wanted to kind of I wanted to write a little article about each instrument group
Hmm.
in the band to kind of explain this whole thing, forbidden instruments.
Hmm.
And what I found out is that the cymbal, or the hakkebræt in Denmark, used to be an instrument that you could find in any kind of upper class household,
Okay.
where the ladies would take this out and put it on the table, because it didn't have a box,
Hmm.
like, and that, so the table would be the sound box,
Hmm.
and that's how they used to be played.
So it ended up being an instrument of the man, right?
Well, you
When
could say
you-
it's yes, and it's, maybe I can say it's forbidden. It's not a folk instrument,
Yeah, yeah.
so it's okay. So it's forbidden in folk, or something like that.
Oh yeah. Well, and that's that's funny because at least that's just, as I said, that's learning, right? You have these
Yeah,
these ideas of, and that's I work a lot with like the Viking music stuff as an academic, and that's pretty much just like half my job is finding out that this isn't how this was, and all this stuff. And
yeah,
oh, now I wish I could rewrite that article that I already wrote. Like just happens on a weekly basis because so
yeah,
much it's hard to tease out like what is the oral tradition or versus what is the actual history, and then that
yeah.
gets complicated. So as you'll never
And
be at the
also,
end of knowledge.
exactly, and all these things, like all these things that you think you know, comes from some kind of collective memory that
Hmm.
has been built over centuries, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
This is also something I'm really interested in, like how, speaking of folk music in Denmark versus folk music in Sweden and Norway, how did Danish folk music get to the point where it has the reputation in Denmark that it does? Yeah,
That's a perfect
that's
segue. That's where I was going with the fiddle
ooh,
question, actually, because
nice.
yeah, I love it when things work out that way. Because you mentioned this licensing system. This, at least in, I don't know, Danish is my weakest of the Scandinavian languages to speak, so I will just say that the
Okay,
Norwegian statsmusikant, that was the term in Norway for the people who were responsible for all of the music in one town. And if you wanted to play music at a public gathering, like a wedding or something, you needed to get a license to do it.
yeah,
In Norway, everything's the middle of nowhere. So you had all of these different people getting away with keeping these traditions
yes,
alive.
yeah,
And I had this really interesting the documentary Trollstemt that Frederick Axelsson did last year or a couple years ago. The reason that rivers and waterfalls and water spirits became so important to fiddlers in Norway is because the only place you could practice your fiddle without anyone hearing it was next to a waterfall.
aha,
And so they would use the landscape itself to hide, which becomes just an incredibly fascinating, conversation about nature and music feeding off
yeah,
one another.
yeah.
But Denmark isn't that middle of nowhere, you know what I mean? So there are less
No,
places to hide, especially because then Denmark also just becomes more aristocratic than the others. Maybe that's not that
yeah,
accurate to say, but at least in
uh,
the perception of Denmark, right? Like you
right,
become a lot more
right.
developed. Maybe that's not even the right word. Again, this is a clumsy
I
conversation,
think
but
Norwegians would be sad to hear that,
oh,
but
but at the same time, I feel like they take it as a point of pride. Like, yeah, we're the wild ones,
yes,
like
yeah,
those
yeah,
cultivated Danes, and they're, like, so I don't
yeah.
know.
It's
This,
like, I think Danes and Swedes were the ones that fought with each other.
oh yeah,
Like,
yeah.
and I just found out we've actually only been separate countries. Like, we've been separate countries for a shorter time than we've been together
Oh yeah, because yeah, Norway was a part of
now.
Denmark for like 400 years. Like they got a lot of
Yeah,
catching up to do.
yeah.
That's a point of contention even today
and
with like
and we
these.
used to be. what's it called? One union
Yeah, there
as
was the
well for a
union that.
while,
Yep.
and yeah. So anyway,
Yeah, so you get into all
that
these,
was another.
yeah, you get into all these very complicated conversations of music and politics getting in together.
Yes, yeah.
But and that's, I guess, setting the stage to talk about sort of, Mia talked about her perspective and observations of why folk music has this different position in Denmark
Mm,
than it does in Sweden or Norway. And I know that I have a lot of listeners of the Nordic Sound who are always like, "Where's the Danish music?
mm,
Where's all the Danish fiddlers?" And
yeah,
so here's one right here.
here's one.
And
Yes.
I would love just, because everyone has, you bring up this term collective memory, which is so important to how we tell the narratives that we do,
Mm,
regardless of historical accuracy or whatever. So I would love to hear sort of what your part of the collective memory is on why is folk music in this much more subdued or quieter. It occupies less of Danish
mm,
culture than it does, especially compared to Norway, for instance.
mm.
So especially like, what was it like not only learning fiddle in this type of environment where it was very much on the margins, but what is your stance or your perspective on sort of how folk music got to where it is in Denmark?
I don't know what Mia said,
Hmm.
but what I think it has to do with the fact that we're, well, right now
Hmm.
anyway, and we've been a small country for 200 years
Hmm.
ish, 225
Hmm.
years. Um, and the necessity of trading and having knowledge
Hmm.
that benefits not only us but anyone that comes to Denmark, like being necessary in a bigger picture,
Hmm.
not only for ourselves but also for the international
Hmm.
trading
Yeah.
community,
Hmm.
or for science and that sort of thing.
Hmm.
And also, like we I think we learned that to be able to be a small country.
Hmm.
And then also we're kind of um, a transit country, so everything comes through,
Hmm.
and not a lot of things like stay put, not even like. So that's why Danish music is it can sound like a lot of different things. Like it can sound like Scottish or Irish music. It
Hmm.
can sound like uh, Breton music, or it
Hmm.
can sound like Swedish music or Norwegian music or Polish music, because it does derive from those places. So
Yeah.
it all kind of got together in Denmark, I think. And I have not investigated this idea, but that's my perception of the whole
Hmm.
situation, actually. And I also think that's somehow why Danes don't consider Danish traditional music to be something to value,
Hmm.
because it's like all other things. There's nothing in Denmark that is truly Danish. I mean,
Okay.
there's nothing like, even Norwegian music and Swedish music or Irish music. You can't say that it's completely Irish. It sounds Irish because it's been being played in that
Hmm.
place, and it has taken on this personality, and this that people play in this style.
Hmm.
Um, and where was I going with that?
Yeah, you were
Uh,
talking about how these all these musics are
yeah,
like these in constant state of influencing one
yes,
another. Yeah,
and
yeah.
and also, like, I think Danish people have a tendency to still think as like we are still a small country,
Hmm.
and in our culture, it's just inherent that we're thinking we need to be something specific to be able to still, like, to manage as a small country. So we
Hmm.
have to look outside of Denmark, take in other kinds of cultures, take in other, like, any inspiration, and any kind of be good at international science and
Hmm.
trade and
Yep.
all these things. And we are.
Hmm.
I mean, for a small country, I think it's, without like sounding too proud, I think we are good at being very international.
Yep, I would agree.
Yeah, and that can also kind of be a bad thing in some cases.
Hmm.
Like what I think it's a bad thing when you consider that there is music culture, there is a music community that
Hmm.
could be more valued as something that is particularly Danish,
Hmm.
and it has nothing to do with nationalism and that sort of thing. It's just
Hmm.
saying there is something in Denmark that we've done for hundreds of years, maybe that has value in
Hmm.
itself, that it is something special for this place
Hmm.
that can also compete with, or not compete, no, not
Hmm.
compete, that can also be as valuable as any other kind of traditional music from any
Hmm.
other place on earth.
Hmm.
And that's just what I think.
That's beautifully said because I do see a connection here between I'll say that your perspective here is one that I've actually never heard before, but I find it incredibly convincing that Denmark is this transit space where especially the control that Denmark has had over anything going in or out of the Baltic for centuries is
Mm,
just like a really important part of just how always taking these outside influences. Um, and that plays into also the fact that Denmark, of the Scandinavian countries, Denmark has always been seen as the most European,
mm,
whatever that means to whoever says it, right? Um,
yeah,
and because of that, a lot of being European, it was this focus on higher knowledge, right? Like higher pursuits. Like if we wanted to even just focus this conversation down to music to stay in our lane, classical music, especially
mm,
for like the last hundreds of years, Denmark has that's been like the standard to the point where it's just like because this is the elevated cultivated music, whereas what the
mm-hmm.
farmers are doing we're not so interested in it because it's
No,
these savage barbarians or whatever. You get a lot of that from the way that the nobility in Denmark writes about peasants,
yes,
is a lot of
yeah,
that. And so that's also something Mia brought up is very much this classism aspect to
mm,
why certain musics get left behind while others get elevated. And I think all of this just works together to paint just like a really vivid, dynamic picture of just like why is folk music seen so differently in Denmark compared to other
mm,
places. Um, the I'm assuming you know the Floating Sofa Quartet.
yes,
Yeah, so they
yeah,
they did this album with Guro Kvifte Nesheim last year,
yes,
the Kusnart,
mm-hmm.
and the whole idea of that album, as you probably know, was just how looking at how music is shared between ports or
Yeah,
coastal
yeah,
cities, and
exactly,
that album is like perfectly illustrating what you're talking about. Is that all of these musics might be from all these different places, but they're being shared through the highway that is the sea, right?
mm,
And that album just stands out to me as one of the most effective examples of what a musical argument can look like.
yeah,
They're arguing that the coast
yes,
is where these ideas get exchanged, and all
yeah,
this music ends up sounding not exactly the same, but similar enough where you can call it
mm,
of the same musical tradition.
yeah.
I think that really paints your point rather well.
And also, like Denmark used to be a naval country, so
Hmm.
like it's not that long ago that the
Yeah.
main roads were the sea.
Yep.
So
Hmm.
yeah,
And it's been like that for it's actually if you think about just in the general history of Europe, it's a rather new thing for the sea to not be the
mm,
highway. Because even
yeah,
when I used to teach the Vikings classes here at CU, one of the most important things we talk about is how is that exact phrase, they were the highways.
yeah,
We're like even though Norway and Sweden are closer together than Norway and Britain, it was easier to get from Norway to Britain because it was easier to sail than it was to hike those friggin' mountains. So
yeah,
because it becomes the absolutely the easiest way, right, to travel, and that is definitely applicable to the way that ideas travel, like music
yeah,
as
yeah.
well. Hmm.
And it also shows in the language. This I have never heard it, but
Hmm.
my father, who's from Western Jutland, he's always said that if you put a Western Jutlander together with a Highlander from Scotland, they will understand each other because it's almost the same language. Like,
Yep.
and I hear what he means. I've never, like, separately, but I've never heard it happen. So, but that theory is quite interesting as well. Speaking of the seas being the main roads, yeah.
Yeah, because I'm pretty invested in this idea of Jutlandic identity because my Nordic studies advisor at CU, Matthias Nordvig, he is from Jutland, and so I hear him, he goes on these. Anyone who knows him knows that he goes on these rants that about just like all these different things, and he's always bringing up being from Jutland. And when I first met him, I was like, this Jutland place sounds fascinating, and so I know earlier on. So anyway, that's my connection to Jutland, is that my very good Danish friend here in Colorado is from Jutland, and he always makes sure you
Right.
know it. And
Yeah.
and
Cool.
I guess because you wanted to talk about it earlier, but the conversation kind of just rolled by maybe a little too fast. But I would love to give you the opportunity, especially because people do come to this podcast to learn about Nordic culture and Nordic music. And is there anything in particular about Jutland in this conversation of folk music that you would want to maybe take this as your opportunity to teach anyone a little something about Jutland, maybe through music or anything else that might be on your mind? Yeah.
Whew. I don't know. I'm not sure how to. I mean,
Maybe even just the folk music, like anything, or is that just too big of a question?
well, I think it's because right now, today, there's
Hmm.
not that much difference between how you play on Sealand or
Hmm.
in Fyn and in Jutland.
Hmm.
Of course, there are like differences between the little, like the places where the music traditions have been strong,
Hmm.
and then like, but that's the thing. There's not a lot of living tradition
Hmm.
left anymore.
Yep.
So it all becomes a bit. You can play anything and say it's from Læsø, the island Læsø, or from Thy, and then play it the same way.
Hmm.
But I don't know. It's not okay. So there is some kind of like the living traditions that used to be that we
Hmm.
still have recordings of and documentation of on sound. Most of them are from Jutland.
Okay.
So there's not a lot of recordings of living tradition from Sealand and Fyn, but the living traditions in Jutland are, well, there's more of them.
Okay, that's
Yeah,
interesting. I didn't know
basically.
that.
So from Thy and Læsø and Fanø
Hmm.
would be the stronger, like the places where the traditional music have lived the longest.
Hmm. Yeah, because
Yeah.
I noticed that the islands in Denmark kind of occupy the same space in folk music history as valleys do in Norway. Like all these valleys have their own traditions, and I find that in Denmark and all the islands instead are what have their signifying style of folk tune. Do you think
Yeah.
that's just because maybe they were more isolated, or
Yeah,
yep,
definitely.
yep,
I mean, Læsø is a place where you have, like today, you take the ferry and it takes 3 hours to get there.
hmm,
And it takes 3 hours on the other side to get to Sweden. So it's
hmm,
very much in the middle of everything. And uh, it was an island that was run by women.
okay,
Like when you inherited the farm, it would be the next woman that inherited the
awesome,
farm, not the man. Yeah. And I think that's just a consequence of, well, it doesn't really have anything to do with music anyway, but it's an interesting fact in history
yep.
that it was also a like fishing community. So you'd have to make sure that somebody in the family was alive to take over the farm. Yeah. But
Oh,
yeah,
that's
so it was
fascinating.
very remote out
Hmm.
there. And yeah,
Yeah, I just noticed that
lovely place.
remoteness is what normally lends itself well to like a distinct folk music culture. Like the more isolated a place is, the more distinct,
Yeah.
and then also in turn, the more proud that the people from that isolated place. I think
Mm,
Appalachia in the United States is a really great example of like Appalachians.
right,
They are proud of being in
right,
the
right.
original final frontier of the United States and
Aha.
having all their crazy hillbilly music. They're very proud of it.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, Fanø with like living tradition there.
Mhm.
It's I don't know if it's proud. as
Yep.
such. It's just they're kind of just their own. They
Hmm.
Another historic fact is they bought the land from the king, so they
Oh
got to
yeah.
play whatever they wanted. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. That's great. Is
Maybe that's why the music has been like staying alive for this long.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah,
know, but
yeah.
that's a tale.
Yeah, and it's also interesting to me that actually islands are how I was first introduced to Danish music because there was that they haven't been as active, but the Møn sessions that were on YouTube,
Yeah,
they were very popular like 5 6 years ago. And remember my very first like encounter with just Denmark in general was, that must have been like 8 years or 7 years ago when I would see these beautiful locations that, bands like Dreamer Circus were playing at.
yeah,
I'd be like, I need to go to that island.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah,
That's also a way to get people to get interested in folk music. Good
beautiful
trick.
locations or
Yeah.
YouTube.
No, well, both.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Yeah, I mean, well, Maya, is there anything else you wanted to talk about, or do you feel like that we sort of got to everything that was on our mind today?
I think we got like around in a lot of corners that I had not anticipated.
And that's
But
how we prefer it, right?
it's cool. Yeah, it's so great. So good. Yeah.
Yeah, I
And
guess
I
it
got
just
to brush off my history, so that's good.
well, and this is the place to do it because, as I said, this is not a history test, and so if
Good.
we got a few years off of something, someone will
Oh,
correct us in the comment section.
yes. Well, that's good too.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
Maya, I did want to give you the opportunity to just talk about your Substack a little bit because you mentioned
Yeah.
that you were writing, and I
Hmm.
would just love to give you the opportunity to give it a little bit of a pitch.
Yeah, thank you.
Hmm.
I just started a Substack publication called The Nordic Folk Composer.
Hmm.
And it's basically a place where I get to write all my reflections down and share them with other people about anything that I make at present or have made in the past, because I have all these like stories and I have notebooks of reflections on like how did I get to the idea of my
Hmm.
orchestra, for example, and how did I make the music performance that I did for my exam concert at the
Hmm.
academy a few months ago. All those sorts of things. I just felt like I was in need of a place to share these things, because speaking of remoteness, I live between Aarhus and Silkeborg in Denmark, in Eastern Jutland.
Okay.
And there's not a lot of folk musicians around here, not a lot of community for my age or my way of living.
Hmm.
And just reaching out and telling other people about these things has become very important to feel like I'm still in connection with my community.
Hmm.
So I gathered up all the email lists that I've gathered through the years where I've toured basically since 2013, I think,
Hmm.
found them all and just put them all in one Substack. So there's, well, they can unsubscribe if they want, but that's how it started, and that's why I actually have a lot of subscribers already, and I'm happy that they're sticking around. I think there's two
Yeah.
unsubscribers so far.
Oh yeah, you
So
can't get hung up on those on the
no,
unsubscribes
no, no,
because
no.
I had even just last week I posted an interview that I did at a music festival and I was wearing this ridiculous outfit. I had this pointed hat. Yeah, I was dressed like a gnome essentially because that's just
Right.
how. And someone unsubscribed and I was like, someone couldn't handle the gnome. Like
Yeah.
it's you just can't
Oh,
you can't
wow.
get hung up on those, right?
No.
But. Uh, no, but I love that you're also interested in the writing aspect, and what you
Yeah.
just said resonates with me because a lot of the reason that I started this podcast, I mean, it originally started as a classical music podcast for just me
Right.
teaching
Ah.
just composer history because my original interest with Scandinavian music was the Romantics, like
Okay.
Grieg
Yeah.
and of course Niels Gade is a favorite of mine. But then over time, it sort of became a way for me to stay connected with. I'm one of those weirdos that's like in between heavy metal and folk music, and so
Yeah.
this podcast is my
I've
way
heard
of
of
like,
those.
yeah. So
They do
this,
exist.
yeah, we do exist, and so this podcast for me in a lot of ways became a way for me to, there are not a lot of Nordic musicians in Colorado. So for me to
Right.
like use this podcast as a way to connect, like even meet people, like as I'm doing right now. So I definitely relate to that need to stay connected on
Yeah.
online with these
Yeah.
communities. Otherwise, you can feel pretty isolated. Yeah.
Yeah. And also just like because I've gotten to this point where I'm thinking a lot and maybe even thinking more than I'm composing or more than I'm playing,
Hmm.
especially right now since I didn't manage to get any gigs at the moment. But
You were
that's okay.
busy. You
And
were
then
busy.
I was very busy. And then, feeling like, or actually just still doing something which I love, which is reflecting on any kind of connection or historic fact or where's this going or
Hmm.
political view on how to treat Danish culture in
Hmm.
Denmark, whatever, that sort of thing, just whatever comes up and connecting the dots and trying to make sense of my thoughts because
Hmm.
they can be all over the place as well.
I am
um,
I am very familiar with the feeling.
yeah, yeah. So it helps me actually to get
Yep.
hold of the like getting into the core of things
Hmm.
pretty much.
Yep.
And it has like I've posted 3 letters now, and I really found out that it's such an important part of who I am,
Yep.
apparently.
Yep.
So yeah,
I
it's
feel
really
that.
great to have found that place to put it out there.
Yeah, because I don't know if you're the same way. I feel like when I speak and when I'm talking, brain's going all over the place, and
Yeah.
so like writing gives me the opportunity to express myself in a way that I just can't from speaking because my squirrel brain just keeps going everywhere while I'm talking. And so it's a different way of making sure like no, how can I actually make sure I explore this topic
Yeah.
as much as I can. Yeah.
And then talking with people is another thing, and you
Hmm.
get something else out of that,
Yep.
which is also very important.
Hmm.
But I really love both. It's
Yep.
very important. Both
Yeah.
of them
Very
are very
important to have
important.
both
So
sides. Yep.
yes, and I'm following a few people on Substack as well that do podcasting as well
Hmm.
and author people.
Hmm.
And like they're authors, they're podcasters, they're Substackers.
Hmm.
I really see the point of doing all 3 things because it's so what comes out of the 3 things are so different.
Yeah, for sure.
So I really love that because you get so many different aspects out of one person.
Hmm. Can
Really.
I drop a big question on you, maybe just as an exercise in this thought?
Sure. Yeah.
Nordic folk music.
Yes.
I don't know how if you're familiar with sort of like the state of Nordic folk music, like on the
Yeah.
internet especially. Um,
Yeah.
a lot of
Maybe.
weird stuff that gets passed off as Nordic folk music.
Right.
And a
Right.
lot of
Yeah.
that are actually the responsibility of people who look like me. So I'm fairly invested in this topic of like, what is Nordic folk music? What
Yeah.
is Nordic folk music here? How is this being, why
Mm.
is this being marketed as Nordic folk music?
Mm.
And without any pretense that you're going to give a perfect answer to this question, I actually one of my favorite questions to ask, and I can't believe I almost forgot to ask it, is I love hearing from folk musicians.
Yeah.
What what is Nordic folk music to you?
Cool.
Because
Yeah.
at the moment, if you were to go into YouTube and just type in Nordic folk music, what you get is a lot of metalheads playing with folk instruments,
Yeah.
and which
Mm.
is an entirely different thing. Yet they're both claiming the same
Yes.
identifier,
Yeah.
right? So I'm gonna
Exactly.
stop. I'm gonna stop filibustering because I would just love to
Okay.
hear your thought, knowing that they won't be perfect and that this is a conversation. I would just love
Okay.
to hear sort of like
Good.
what is your take on just like what makes Nordic
Ooh.
folk music?
Well, I think I'm gonna start somewhere else because
Okay.
calling trying to call my music Nordic folk music, or well, trying to call anything Nordic folk music does not describe anything at the moment, apparently.
Okay.
Like
Yeah.
it doesn't have any what do you call it? It doesn't have any like anything that is sure
Hmm.
in anything. Like
Okay.
it doesn't have one type of instrument, it doesn't have one type of sound, it doesn't have one type of people or one type of nationality or one type of history.
Hmm.
It's all over the place. So it makes it really difficult to, for example, um, Nordic folk musicians or traditional musicians that play traditional music, but go touring or release music to actually with one genre to explain what it is they do. There's
Hmm.
there's no way you can explain what you do by calling it Nordic folk music, which makes it really problematic to try to brand anything. I mean, there's been a lot of talk in the in the Nordic countries, the past 10 years, 15 years about how do we we should brand this as one thing. We know it's like everything is different.
Hmm.
It's like Celtic music basically. The
Yeah, yeah.
idea is to brand it as Celtic music does, because Celtic music is not one thing either.
Hmm.
It's a bunch of, well, places that have history of Celtic people,
Hmm.
but Celtic people, it wasn't the Celtics that immigrated to the States, like,
Yeah.
you know, that sort of thing. So we like, if we should treat it in that way, we might as well just call everything Viking music, in my opinion. It's the same thing.
Yeah, that's a
And
real.
I get a little
Yep.
bit frustrated that if you call it, like, I was just thinking about this today actually, all these, like, on the streaming platforms, if you search playlists
Hmm.
for something Nordic folk,
Don't get me
get,
started on the
oh
playlist.
goodness, yeah. So that's the thing. Like, if you search on these playlists and want to hear something that sounds like traditional music from Denmark or Sweden or Norway or Nordic countries, you're not gonna get that if you search on the words Nordic folk on these streaming platforms.
And that's
So
what.
what should you
Mhm.
search for? I have no
Exactly.
idea.
That's what interests me about it so much, is because it's sort of Heilung is a perfect example of a band that shows up
Mm.
on these playlists called Nordic folk, and then you even have a more interesting conversation of what if a band gets called Nordic folk while the band itself doesn't want to be called that.
Yeah,
And also, it gets to be a very messy conversation with all of this stuff, but
yeah.
I'm always concerned with representation.
And I think, and I'm getting into a kind of a touchy subject,
Of
maybe,
course. Hmm.
but the thing about cultural appropriation,
Hmm.
that conversation takes place in so many different places,
Of course. Yeah, yeah.
and for me, as a white person,
Hmm.
I think it's difficult to actually say I have a right to have a culture, like a living culture. how
Hmm.
how do I fit into this landscape of
Hmm.
people wanting to claim their right to own their own culture? And
Hmm.
I completely understand the people that have not been able to do that before
Hmm.
and now claim, like, getting back there, reviving stuff and keeping things alive that
Hmm.
were almost died out and all that stuff.
Hmm.
I completely understand that and respect that, and I think it should happen.
Hmm.
But then in that context, to be a white person who also claims to have a culture, that's a bit difficult somehow,
Hmm. Yep,
I
it gets
feel.
messy.
Yeah,
You're right, because you get tangled up into all of these, and that's why I said, like, I know this conversation won't be perfect, but
yeah,
I would rather have it imperfectly than not have
yeah.
it, right? Um,
And
yep.
I also like, my point is also, as a Danish person, I'm a native of my country.
Hmm.
I'm not an immigrant. I haven't been threatened by anyone else, true,
Hmm.
but I'm still a native to my country.
Hmm.
I don't know how far back we need to go to say that all white people were invaders.
Yep.
Do we need to go there? That's another question. How far back should we go to say that we as white people don't have a right to have a culture that we
Yep.
want to keep alive?
And
Um,
those sorts of claims too were actually part of the reasons that the reverse movement got so popular in the States, is because it got so popular amongst college age people to claim that, like white people don't have culture. And I actually blamed that kind of rhetoric for why Trump got elected the first time, because
Right.
that was the response to it. I was there. I was in college when this happened. So like I'm watching all of these things like happen right in front of me, and I'm like, I don't like how this looks like it's going to play out.
Yeah.
And I know even right now, if people have watched this late into the video, right, this conversation can prompt a lot of visceral reactions from people. But the point is that those reactions are a part of the conversation, too, because we're in a weird time, right? We're in a
Right.
very
Yeah, we
strange
are.
time to have conversations like this. But whereas a lot of people maybe look at that as a reason to avoid them, I actually really respect and appreciate the fact that you were willing to have it, because that's the most, at least for me, that's the most fun part of doing this.
Yeah, and I think we learned something from hearing perspectives on these subjects. Also, if they're difficult to talk about, because I'm totally for everyone having like owning their culture,
hmm
but it does become a bit strange and hard to say that as a white person you're a native of a country,
And especially because
right?
Americans, I can't even
No.
flirt with that conversation because it's just not real, right? Because
Yeah.
I can never claim. So Colorado people, just to lighten the mood a little bit, there's a huge contingency of people in Colorado who love to say, "Well, I'm a native. I'm a Colorado native," just because they
Right.
were born here. And it's so ironic when you have these people in Colorado who are not Native American, who just very proudly call themselves Colorado natives, and the
Right.
rest of the state kind of looks at them. It's like, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing? Like, why do you have a bumper sticker that says native? Like, I don't. Like, it's a very
Yeah.
strange culty thing in Colorado to
Okay.
because Colorado became such a popular state to move to, because we were one of the firsts to legalize marijuana. So
Right.
after weed got legal here, this became like the destination place to move to, which
Okay.
created this response movement of the people who were proud to claim they were here first. And
Right. Right.
you right there get to see how weird that conversation gets.
Yeah,
Um,
it's another, like it's a different topic. It's not
yeah.
like it's a more of a political topic,
Yep.
or like it's not geographical.
Yep.
It's mindset,
Yeah.
or
And
like
that's where most of it ends up, right?
yeah.
But I don't know. I guess going back to the Nordic folk thing, is there anything
Yes.
is there anything that you want to maybe like tie it up with? Because I what you already said, I think was really insightful and helpful, because I've had a lot of folk musicians, in mostly Norwegians, who talk to me about this sort of thing in private, but not in public, right? And a lot of I've been told a lot that this podcast and others should maybe platform this conversation more, because it is, even if there's not one clean answer, it's at least worth talking about.
Me too. I'm very happy to talk about that, because I think it's a important subject, and it's also just nice to talk to someone about this situation,
Yep.
because
This,
I don't know what to do with it. And I just keep playing the same music, right? I don't change any of my music just because like other types of music are called the same.
hmm hmm
But I honestly don't know what to call it to explain to other people what it is,
Yep.
because they won't know what it is when I call it Nordic folk.
Yeah, because then when you call it Nordic folk, a lot of people look it up and then they're like, "Where's the antlers? Where are the
Yeah,
drums?"
and I think that one of the playlists on one streaming platform, which I won't mention the name
Mhm,
of, but
mhm.
on the front page of that, it's First Aid Kit, this the Norwegian duo that sound a bit like Simon and Garfunkel.
They are
That's
Swedish.
apparently
They are Swedish, but
oh
they're yeah, but yeah, First Aid Kit.
well, what do you know?
Yeah,
Well,
but they
yeah,
were very popular in the States because they're part of that wave. I don't know if you use this term, but Nordicana is
Nordicana.
the
Ooh,
fusion of the fusion of Americana and
yeah,
Nordic music. Yeah, they were even on like the Tonight Show or something. They were
Yeah, I
very
know.
popular here because they sounded like every other 2010s hipster band in the United States. I love them.
Yeah,
A
they're,
lot of their
they're really
music,
good. Yeah, I
I really
respect.
do enjoy, right? So when I say
Me
that they
too.
sound like hipster music, to me, I mean like that's my generation.
Yeah,
Like,
and that's
so,
fine.
yeah,
It's just the whole thing of like discovering that that kind of music is on the front page of a playlist called Nordic Folk.
exactly, because it's acoustic. And I
I'm a
think
bit
that's
confused. Yeah,
right.
yeah. So
It's messy, isn't
it
it?
is.
And the reason I laughed so hard at what you said, because you said, I don't know what to do with this information.
Yeah,
That's exactly how I feel, but I feel the need to do something with it, but I
yeah.
don't know what
But
that something is. And
no.
so at the moment, it's just talk about it.
Yes, and I guess at some point it's going or I don't know. Maybe it will never sort itself out. Maybe
Yep.
it will just stay like this. But it's the same thing as calling something world music.
Yep.
We're in the same category of strange things to
Yeah,
talk about.
yeah, strange names
Yeah,
for things like what is world, and yeah, and don't
yeah,
even get me started on just ethnic music. Like,
exactly.
yeah, I'm an ethnomusicologist. Like, this is literally what my discipline is built on, is talking about this kind of stuff. So
Yeah,
I have this compulsion and obligation to talk about it. It's honestly, it's just fascinating to me because
yeah.
the not to beat this dead horse too much, because the it gets confusing when people think that if I say it's not Nordic folk music means that it's bad or means that
Mm.
it's not
Oh,
music.
right, right.
When, like,
Yeah,
for me, it's like, as I said, as one of those freaks that's between heavy metal and folk music myself, I see the appeal to mix the two into,
hmm,
in like, essentially play heavy metal on acoustic instruments. I see
yeah,
the appeal. I love it. But it it needs to, at least to me, as someone who's a part of that culture, it needs to find a way to exist without being parasitic in a way. And
yeah.
maybe that's a little much, but that's how I feel about
Or
it. Yeah.
or being parallel universes that are called the same thing.
Yep. And I just
I don't
know,
know.
yeah, I just know
Yeah.
Alakar had the best answer to this when I had him on. He was like, "Look, man, I like playing Skyrim. I like big muscly dudes, grunting and roaring." And I was just like, "Yeah, I get the appeal," but he's like, at the same time, it's not Nordic folk.
No,
So, but anyway,
not really.
Maya, thank you so much for humoring me with that question. I know it can kind of feel like being put on the spot,
It's fine.
yeah, but
It's a new take. It's a
mhm.
new subject to talk about, and I'm really happy to contribute with
Yeah,
whatever it was.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's something because, as I said, we're not going to have the answers to it,
No,
but it's worth talking about 100%.
it's nice talking about it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So, Maya, thank you so much for coming onto the Nordic Sound. It's really been a pleasure to talk to you and finally get to know you after following you for all these years.
Yeah. Thank you
And
for having me. Thank you so much.
yeah, of course, I've actually always struggled getting actual folk musicians on the podcast because of this thing we've been talking about, where it's like, why does this metalhead want to talk to me about folk music? And I just love that over time, more and more of you are sort of maybe taking the chance on this bald bearded American to
But
give
also,
you guys.
you see the value of talking to someone who's not in the middle of it, really. You
Yep.
get other questions and you get other perspective, and I
Yeah, I'm
really
sort of
like
like
that.
watching
Yeah.
from afar from the Colorado
Yeah.
Rockies, like what's going on over there.
Wondering what we're doing, and then we'll have to explain it to someone else than ourselves. That's maybe a good thing, I think.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, cool. I'm glad to offer my services. I'm glad my obsession with traditional Scandinavian music is paying off in some strange roundabout way.
Me too. Yeah,
Awesome.
absolutely.
So Maya, if people want to learn more about you and follow you after listening to this, where can they do so?
Well, I have a website called Maja Kjaer,
Hmm.
MajaKjaer.dk. That's my personal website, and you
Hmm.
have all my different kinds of projects, and my Substack thing is in
Yep.
there too. All my different bands. There's a shop where you can buy me my music. Please buy my music. Don't just stream it. Yes.
Hmm.
And I have a Facebook page called Maja Kjaer Music, and I have an Instagram account as well. And I'm not on TikTok.
Good.
I wouldn't
have
know what to do.
I'll have to be
So-
dragged into it kicking and screaming if I do, but at the moment I'm holding it off, and I hope to
And
die.
I was
hope to die
very-
without a TikTok. Yeah.
I was very reluctant on starting a Substack as well until I kind of figured out what it could do in
Yep.
addition to all the other things instead of just being the same thing.
Yep.
That's another story. Yeah, so I have, there's different things. You can go watch my shows when they appear in the calendar.
Awesome.
And and I teach different places as well. So if you're in Denmark, or even if you want to have an online workshop with me, that's very possible, and we can do something about that.
Oh, cool. Hell
Definitely
yeah. I'm glad you
Yeah.
mentioned that. I'm glad you mentioned that because those online classes that I've been learning Nyckelharpa for the last few months, and
Cool.
I did, and yeah, those online classes, I did one with Torbjørn Nesbaum, and even just like 45 minutes with
Yeah.
that guy, I was like, I just learned quite a bit about all this.
Yeah.
And I'll advocate for not just teaching yourself, which is of course also valuable, but actually like taking the opportunity to learn from
Yes.
talented and insightful musicians can do a lot for you, a lot more for you than just teaching yourself can do.
Yeah.
So I will advocate for taking a class from Maja because she's an excellent
And-
fiddler.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And like I would say, any of us traditional traditional musicians are happy to share, happy to teach, because that's how we learned ourselves. We have to share to keep things going. Right?
Excellently said. I think
Yeah.
that's a beautiful note to end on, Maja. So thank you so much again for coming onto the podcast. Just hang out for
Thanks
a
for
second
having
after I stop the recording. But as we always say, great to have you. Don't be a stranger. All right.
Absolutely.